Hello and welcome to Clawful Evil, Probable Claws, a show where we discuss Wildbow's most deceptive work. I'm your very villainous hostess, Vice Versailles.
And I am your conniving hostess, Kipos. In this debriefing, we're covering chapter 4.5.
My goodness, this was hard to shut up about last week.
Yeah, that's so reasonable. I think as soon as we finished recording, I think I went and had lunch, and then I came back and sat down and live read it because, yeah, I was very hyped for what 4.5 was, and I think it delivered in so many ways that I wasn't expecting. And it was just excellent.
I was really prepared at the end of 4.4 to see a sort of odd couple buddy cop strange like locking in this group with Mia as their guiding light.
Yeah, exactly.
For the rest of the book. And over the course of 4.5, Ben shoots that idea right in the foot.
Yeah, he really executes the idea, but not in the way that people normally execute an idea, but in the way that you would execute a person. In the sense that, yes, he is not there for it.
It's brutal. I'll just get the chapter summary out of the way.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
While Mia tries to deliver Ben and Co. to safety through strategic deployment of facts and road spikes, and Sterling chucks up from all the baloney, the truth comes out, and is forcefully shoved back into the closet as even Sean closes ranks around Natalie's alternative facts. Ripley introduces Ryder to the concept of books, which have paper and ink, and the striking police promptly evacuate the library, while Natalie cements the deception and Ben breaks into an elevator. Natalie opens up about her own experiences with bullying and corrupt authority, which Ben promptly deletes after he and Ryder shoot the shit about working with Davy instead.
And I mean, okay, I finished this chapter in my live read and I was like, that's the arc done. This is where we leave Ben. And I mean, okay, so 4.6 has come out and has been out for a couple of days now. So obviously that's wrong. But I don't know. I feel like you finish 4.5 and you can get I got the vibe. A couple of people I talked to got the vibe that yeah, that's it. That's the arc. So I'm very, I don't know. I'm very keen to see what happens in 4.6. Very anxious about it, but yeah, it's what an ending, to the chapter. My God. Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's something common to Claw's chapters that they really take advantage of the web serial format to cliffhanger at every available opportunity.
I mean, that
really
gets
helped the story feel like it was seat of the pants, a high momentum. But I really think that we coordinate in 4.4 for now. Could have been a finishing line. Ben's resolution could have been a finishing line, and I think that that's consistent. I'm not nearly as shocked that the arc still went on.
That's fair. Yeah, look, and I do think that these very cliffhangering moments are a big throwback to my Pact readers, to my Worm readers, who I'm sure is everybody. Just that's I don't know, almost like an earlier Wildbow style of being more aggressive with the cliffhangers, to create a more intense story compared to obviously, so Wildbow just finished Pale before he started Claw. Well, he took a break, but and that's his most recent work, and that was we had some fucking amazing cliffhangers there, it was really, really good. It's a fucking amazing story. But it's definitely more sprawling, and it was created, well, it wasn't created at the start to be more sprawling, sorry, Wildbow. But as it went on, it was definitely more sprawling, and so you didn't end with as many cliffhangers. Not as much, action, left hanging on the edge of that cliff,
Well, honestly, it's part of what's made Claw feel really cinematic.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is not. I don't want to debase the series by comparing it to a CW show, but it is this sort of and then the credits roll type of ending line.
Yeah, and I mean that's the great thing that you can do with like very episodic media like this, where you know that you have the next episode, quote unquote, obviously chapter, coming out, that you can happily leave it with like this and know that your audience is going to be very engaged and very keen to come back and pick up the next chapter. Whereas, obviously if you do that in like a book, normally, the end of the book is like a big cliffhanger like this, and it does happen in books, but it's a lot harder for someone to keep up the momentum with a book if they're going to have to wait 3 years for the next one, whereas obviously if you wait a chapter, like if you wait a week, you're still very much engaged and like, oh shit, this was our ending moment. Yeah. Yeah, and look, I think we'll get a bit more into like why Ben does what he does, but like I don't know, we were talking a little bit about it just before we started recording. I'm like, obviously it's understandable. Like you can see why he makes the decision that he makes. He very clearly talks about why he's doing it. I don't think it's a good decision, but like I understand it. I understand where he's coming from here. I don't, yeah. I'm going to give him shit for it, but like I understand why he's making the choice. Like, yeah.
I believe I'll be like pointing out this sign repeatedly throughout as we unpack it. But ultimately, from at least my personal lens, the thing that bothers me is that Ben, up until around 4.3, believed that he was a truth seeker, but believed his values very loudly and clearly, and has over the course of 4.4 and 4.5 really consistently violated them for the sake of variously ambition or the easy way, or something that he has convinced himself is the easy way. Or
even things that he thinks is the right thing to do, but he still is violating his like core principle.
You would hope that even as you do something that is difficult but is something more important, you can maintain some of your values, but he's rather quick to drop them off.
Very quick to drop them.
To get started, I'm gonna get into the car. And my goodness, what like I was right there with Sterling as far as as wanting to lose
anxiety
my lunch.
vomit. Yeah. I mean, it was very intense, but it was very good. Yeah, and like you have these like multiple layers of conversations happening, and I like that we're like really starting with this comment from Mia saying like, what is Ryder thinking? What is Roderick thinking? And it's probably you can get away if they don't see you as a problem, but protecting the kids, your friend, and making sure they don't shoot before confirming identities or allegiances is hard. So like, yeah, like pointing out that if Ryder, fuck's sake, I'm probably going to call him Ryder a bunch because the internal narration has stopped to calling him Ryder, and it's just hard to remember.
This is what you get for committing to your values, everyone. I've won. I've won through consistency.
Okay. Anyway, so Roderick knows that if he steps out of the car, puts his hands on his head and says like, "Here is my badge. I'm Roderick. I'm Ryder, the parapolice." That they're going to be like, "Okay, we know you. Like, we are loosely working with you. That's fine." But like having that and the difference between that and like being able to then just like take all the kids and like Ben and everyone away is obviously like there's a massive gulf of difference in that. He's like, "You're still pretending I'm a traitor," and it's like, no, he's not a traitor in that sense. It's just that he is working with the system, and the system is working with David Cavalcanti. So, yeah.
Not pretending. I'll just let you know this is David Cavalcanti we're up against. You should know of him from the Angel Circle job. Adjust your planning accordingly. Not pretending is just an interesting reply to "you're still pretending I'm a traitor," because it's not an answer. It's she could have said, "I'm not pretending you are a traitor," or she could have said, "I'm not pretending you are a traitor." And the way that she just throws that out there and lets anyone in the room read it however they'd like so
Yeah.
confirms what she asserts to Ben, which is that her specialty is navigating this kind of tension.
And especially, like, I don't even think that she thinks he's a traitor. I think she just knows where, like, his allegiance to, like, this judge that he's friends with who has an allegiance to the Cavalcantis through the system. Like, it's not saying he's a traitor. It's saying, like,
It's
like,
not the kind of
where
framework that she would use to analyze it. But
Exactly,
at the same
exactly.
time, she refuses to engage with that wording. Exactly.
Yeah.
She moves on to specifics, but she has. And I note that the Angel Circle job is interesting because we have, of course, the Angel of Death, and we know that Davy has previously had a lot of dependence on doctors to accomplish the torture that he does. So I would be very interested to know if the Angel of Death was involved in the Angel Circle job, and that's part of where she gets her moniker.
It's definitely possible. It's just so hard to know at the moment, like, the Angel Circle job. And it's like, it's so hard to know. I mean, obviously we don't get, like, any context except that, like, he, like, grips the steering wheel tighter and, like, accelerates, like, unintentionally, basically accelerates. So he seems like
she's got him, but it's unclear how.
Yeah, like, we don't know what this job is, except that, like, he says, like, yeah, I do know, like, who Davy Cavalcanti is, to Ben. And it's like, okay, like, in what context, though? Like, in a context where you'd be okay working with him? Because, like, yikes. Or in a context where, like, because obviously we know, like, Roderick's specialty being, like, people in, like, domestic violence situations and, like, kidnapped children and stuff like that. And it's like, in what way do you know Davy Cavalcanti through your work such that you think it's a good idea to work with him? Which is part of why I'm very curious about how 4.6 is going to go, because obviously, like Roderick's allegiances are, his, like, structural allegiances are to, like, well, the structure and the court. And I'm so sorry if you can hear my cat scrabbling around in the background. They're playing.
Everyone, let's introduce our first guest for this episode. This is Kipper's cat.
Yeah, hopefully they won't yell at each other, but we'll see.
There's two cats. We have two guests, everyone.
We have two guests. So... yeah, like, Roderick's, like, structural allegiances are to, like, the structure which David Cavalcanti is part of. But, like, his personal allegiances and, like, his personal moral compass. Sorry, I'm watching my cat do something that... she's looking like she's about to do something very illegal. We'll see how she goes. So, yeah, obviously... I'm so sorry. I keep on losing my train of thought because of this. Yeah, so we have the disconnect between how Roderick is aligned with his work and how he is aligned with his values. And so I'm curious to see how that's going to play out in the rest of the story, because obviously we don't really get it at the end of 4.5. He just kind of says, I'll make the call on my phone, which, leads us to believe that he's kind of okay with working with Davy. But again, like, it's so hard to know. Yeah.
Next along the line, while we will still have quite a bit to learn about Ryder, I believe, in the rest of the series. If he sticks around, 4.6 may be very revealing. But in the meantime, we do have Ripley.
Yes, we do have Ripley. And she's so good here, like, in this car. Like, Mia and Natalie are kind of yelling a bit at each other. Well, I don't think Mia is yelling as much, but Natalie is definitely yelling here, and Ben and Ryder are, like, trying to talk loudly or yell. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but, like, everyone is talking very loudly, and Sterling's clearly fucking freaking out. And so Ripley, like, raises her voice, like, she yells at everyone. She's like, please, and, like, covers Sterling's ears, and there's no shouting, like you're freaking out the child. Which it's so, it's what Sterling needs, is someone to obviously we've been talking about advocacy for children a lot in this arc, and how it has a lot of the time not been very good. But yeah, we're actually seeing someone fucking advocate for the child and be like, you're doing harm to this child. Stop. Of course, not noting that, this is clearly doing harm to her as well, because nobody likes adults shouting when they're young.
But
especially
she's
in a
11,
small car.
So she can take it. But the 5-year-old, come on.
Yeah, she can raise her voice in return and navigate it and put a boundary down. And I'm glad that everybody has tried to respect that. I think Natalie fucks up once. In that she raises her voice once, and I think Ripley says something and she stops. But generally, after this point, people try and keep their voices quieter, which is good.
Sterling did fully throw up from the distress of it all.
And poor kid, he's so... I mean, he's 5, he's 5 and there's 3 adults in a car yelling. And we not to mention the chase and everything.
Yeah, not it's been a lot for this kid, but we've previously gotten into the question of especially with Sterling, how cycles of abuse echo out through parenting, what it does to a kid to be raised by someone who is still struggling with a lot of their own trauma, and the ways that echoes out. Of course, Sterling is young enough that there's every possibility that things aren't set in stone, that he can get care, that he can on a shorter time scale than working with this for his whole life. And we're seeing Ripley make a pretty big difference here, and the within that discussion, if Sterling is in the situation he's in, we have Megafire's essay to cover most of that. As a consequence of neglect, of not being the priority, of being raised in the shadow of Camellia, Ripley is now now that there is a real person casting that shadow, she is turning it from a place of neglect to a place of shelter. And it's so interesting that Ripley, of all people, would be a vector of caring in this scenario, because we have, of course, Ryder with his phone for saving children and people in need. We have Ben, who has dedicated himself to investigation of such. Natalie, whose whole life has been trying to get Ripley back. And it's the girl raised by Mia, who has similarly had a traumatic upbringing, that is actually putting care into this environment. Over the course of this chapter, Ben analyzes Mia and looks through her material and considers her language, and slowly decides his position that he is going to be against her. And I think one thing that he never brings into his equation is Ripley's quality of character, because there's a lot to say about the Mia's assertion that she is a heroine, that she saves children, is very very grandiose. It's not the kind of thing that you would believe of a criminal. And certainly Ben is from all the material he's gained, from all the things he's seen, there's very little reason to believe that someone who's come up to your face and told you outright, I'm the good guy here, is actually the good guy here. But absolutely. Ripley in this scenario is putting proof to that, and he doesn't bring that into his equation. If there was a way to look at Ben's argument as it unfolds, that considered it as that's very well evidenced, that's very well argued, what are the blind spots, what are the missing pieces, I think Ripley's behavior is a big missing piece for him, because he's looking at the data, he's looking at the things that he's gotten from first Valentina, then from Mia, and he doesn't see what is right in front of him, which is a kid that likes books and is good at looking after other kids. A genuinely caring young kid that
even in this like horrible traumatic experience, is prioritizing helping the more helpless than herself, which is like fuck, like, you know, it's really good. Like, she's so good in this moment. And you do have to say, like, there's something in the way that she was brought up that has helped, like, express this. You know, like, you can't look at that and say, oh, Mia can't have anything to do with this. Like, Mia and Carson definitely wouldn't have, like, done this. When it's like, the way that kids are brought up really affects how they interact with other kids. And we even fucking see Natalie talk about that with, you know, her two family members that were, like with the two family members that were like abusing her, and how they had similarly been abused at home. And like how horrible that is. But then also like knowing that, you know, being brought up in a way where you are encouraged to encourage violence, you know, makes you put more violence out into the world. So yeah, it's really interesting that they can't look at Ripley, who is like very clearly putting out compassion and kindness and love and into the world,
and also snark,
not be able to walk that back, and snark,
also
too.
snark.
Yeah, some great snark. Yeah. So yeah. And then, he has this. All right, so Ben has this great like internal thought of like, when he's saying, you know, that it doesn't make sense what Mia's saying. He's like, it doesn't make sense to make this relationship between Ripley and Natalie worse by validating you. And then Mia's just like really gets him in his core of like, or it doesn't get him in his core as much. It gets, from an outside perspective, it hits the core of his philosophy, but he doesn't even really think about it. Of like, I thought you'd be better with this, Ben. And it's like, yeah, like this is supposed to be his philosophy, that you shine the light of truth out into the world and it casts out the shadow and everything is better for it.
No,
and
it's the truth, he said, knowing it was a lie.
Yeah, fuck. Yeah, exactly. That line there is so brutal. You know, like, yeah. Like it's so, again, it's one of those moments that's like really damning for Ben's personal philosophy, because the person that says, you know, I believe we should always like shine the light of truth into the world and banish the shadow and it'll make everything better, should never say it's the truth knowing it's a lie. Like, yeah, it's like perfectly aligned against his own personal philosophy from earlier in the arc. And that's hard to read, you know? Yeah. Like, seeing someone corrupt themselves like this is like, fuck.
And there's something to be said for how Ben fits into the collection, from like Valentina trying to figure out where she stands, who she's replicating, Carson and Mia, like dedicated criminals. Like this is something bad he is doing, but he's doing it for what he thinks is a good reason, which is he thinks it will help to get Ripley out of Mia's clutches. And like from the jump, that is in exact material the right thing to do. But then we have this long sequence of the closing of ranks as Ben calls Sean, and Sean who previously volunteered the information that it was not 15 seconds, that it was a full argument that was very distracting. And that it could have, it is that Mia is telling the truth, essentially. Even Sean closes ranks and concurs with Natalie. And the thing that he is trying to get out of violating this value, by telling this lie as though it's the truth, is to just like get Ripley to believe the people in the room. And it flat doesn't work, because eventually, through bludgeoning her, she eventually settles on "I don't know," because when they arrive there, there's that scene with Natalie, holding Sterling in her arms, insisting that Mia is a liar, and Ripley insisting she hasn't lied to me, not like this. it does not actually make those two closer. It does not successfully play
No.
into Natalie's narrative.
No, it just pushes her away from Mia.
And
which, yeah.
it ultimately,
Poor Ripley.
this attempt to make things more coherent by involving a matter of deep incoherence does not work. And it's again yielding to what Natalie required in the previous chapter of like, I never said that, even though it's on camera, that sort of thing. And it self-defeats in essentially over the course of this. Instead of getting Ripley to be closer to Natalie and further away from Mia, he just breaks Ripley's spirit. And she's heartbroken and she starts to cry. And then dear Sterling, Mom, Ripley's crying because he doesn't know how to do caring yet either, and he just thinks that the authority figure ought to know, and he's the good intention is right there, and he's trying so hard. And who made Ripley cry? Everyone in the car, because there's it's Ben's I think more central value, the thing that he certainly seems to decide on much more often, of making things out to be like an action film, like turning it into drama, turning it into good showmanship, and it this is the fruit of that labor, crying children.
And it's so painful. Like, you know, thinking about this chapter from Ripley's point of view, it's like it's exactly what they said in the hospital, where they said about deprogramming her. You know, it's like brainwashing her. They're lying and pushing their perspective onto a child that is not really old enough to firmly hold her own conviction in the face of multiple authority figures.
Yeah, and instead of deprogramming her, there isn't a program to deprogram. This is the foundational level of the person here. So
yeah, they're just trying to break her.
They just break her
like,
spirit,
fuck.
and
like it's so bad. It's again. This is like a lot of chapters in Arc 4 have been kind of hard to read because it's like we're just watching a child get traumatized, and it hurts. Yeah, like it really hurts, and you just can't do anything about it, you know? Like, I don't know. Like that's it's really hard. And obviously, like Ben does try and like encourage Natalie to like be kinder to Ripley a couple of times, but like he never shows her that kindness. Like he barely interacts with Ripley except for to lie to her, and it's like, again, like, because he sees this happening with Sterling, like, earlier in the arc, a fair few times, of seeing Sterling be neglected and stepping in and helping him. And it's like, he just can't do the same for Ripley, who needs someone to step in and help her. And she's getting nothing, because he seems to want Natalie to do it, because that would be good for his film and good for Natalie. But she can't. And so instead of, you know, doing something, instead of stepping up, like, you know, because obviously he's seen Natalie fail with Sterling and has tried to step up and help. And so instead of stepping up and helping with Ripley, he just lets her fall by the wayside and then chastises Natalie after the fact. And it just hurts. Like, especially the jump from 4.4, where you had Ripley with her friends, to like this, where she's just surrounded by people that want to put their narrative onto her without letting her even like discuss things. Oh, I don't know. It sucks. It sucks. Brutal. Anyway, back to the notes, back to the actual notes, rather than this very long sidetrack of like, this is traumatizing for a child. Where are we? Okay, there we are. So Ben's like in the car. I think he says like, you know, I'm aware of like what's happening, but what do we do? She tracks us. Davy Cavalcanti tracks us. One will take Ripley away. The other supposedly, quote unquote, you know, wants to hurt us. And I like this as like an early, you know, on the reread, going back and being like, okay, this is where he's starting to like, he's doubting that Davy even wants to hurt them. And, you know, maybe potentially if Roderick shared like details about what the fuck the Angel Circle job was, he could be like, oh God, no, we should be like running as far away as possible from Davy Cavalcanti. But yeah, you can see how here he's trying to like square away those options. Like, it's like baseline for him that Ripley stays with Natalie at the moment. That's what he wants. And if someone maybe wants to hurt us, maybe, you know, what do we do? So, yeah.
Leaving himself as outs because he's
yes.
trying to be consistent, at least about what he said.
Yeah. I do like I don't like. Okay, that's a lie. I'm saying that I like it. In the library where they're talking about this cop who was like sexually harassed and blackmailed, where like she's had all of these like photos of herself put in like a cling wrap dress, naked, I think, like, yeah, and she clearly looks super unhappy about it, and so Mia has like gotten a hold of these photos. So it seems that like from like Davy and the like, that they are using those to blackmail those striking police to do what they want, which is like, God, that's fucked, you know. It's just fucked. Yeah. It's again, that's one of those moments where it's like that's kind of hard to read, you know, like, Jesus.
Their idea apparently was that she was wearing a condom in keeping with the Protect Our Police slogan. Yes.
Yeah, like, and it's like stupid, whatever. It's I don't know. Like, if she was happy with it, it's something you do 20 drinks in, you know. But the fact that she clearly looks mad about it, clearly looks unhappy with it, is like, Jesus fucking Christ, that's horrible. Yeah. I don't know. There's not much more to say about that, I think, apart from it's incredibly uncomfortable. Yeah. Yikes.
I guess it's sort of fits neatly with Ben's behavior in that it's, let's do something that sells well on social media and we'll sacrifice as many things as well along the way as possible. If it means getting that sort of better press.
Yeah. Except, of course, these ones weren't circulated yet, I think, because they're using them for blackmail. So I don't think those have been on social media yet, but I think they are going on social media if these cops don't do what they say. Which it's like, ugh, yikes. Ugh. Anyway, yeah. So Natalie's actually kind of decent in the library. Pretty decent. And then they start like going down the stairs and Natalie's like, Ripley, I hate that name. And then like Ripley's just like, well, I kind of hate you. And it's like, yeah, reasonable. Don't tell your child that you hate the name that they have. You hate their name, their representation of the self. Like, grow up. You know? Like, I get that it sucks. But too bad. As Ben puts later, it's worse for her. Yeah, like, I think this really, really encapsulates a lot of how I've been feeling about Natalie, which is suck it the fuck up. It's harder for her. Which, yeah, like, it is. Just anytime Natalie is going through it, this arc, Ripley's going through it worse. And Natalie wants everyone to like give her the benefit of the doubt, give her, you know, the joy of being believed, like not the joy, but like the right of being believed and of having like self-agency. And she doesn't fucking give shit to Ripley. Instead, she like, what's the fucking opposite word of validates? Invalidates. She invalidates her name. She invalidates her entire identity. And like, cats. and they talk, they talked last chapter about like use Ripley's name for now. Don't badmouth Mia. Like, just try and be decent. And like she does use the name Ripley, but she can't help herself, and she has to be like, Ripley, oh, I hate that name. Like, don't say that. Do not. This is advice for all of those parents out there. If your child has a name and you don't like it, harden the fuck up. It's a fucking name. Like, grow up. Deal with it. Don't tell them that you hate their name. That's horrible. It's so invalidating, it's cruel, it's unnecessary. Like, harden the fuck up, basically. If you tell your child that you hate their name, you deserve to be hated by them in kind. So, yeah. Too bad.
Ripley really closing the cause and effect loop there, just saying outright what it does.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no shit, she hates you. You are like trying to invalidate her entire identity. Like, there's no, and this is what I was saying, I think 2 chapters ago, is like, I don't really see a way forward for Natalie being a parent for Ripley, because she has fucked it so completely and thoroughly. How do you even come back from this where you have made your child hate you so much? Because you just cannot stop invalidating their life, their experience, their friends, everything. Like, God, yeah. And then she like explicitly says to Ben, like, it was only 15 seconds. All of your information, like, you can, like, Ripley, you can look at Ben's information later. It all, like, it agrees with me. And he agrees. Like, he says, yeah, he thinks, like, no, it fucking doesn't. But he says yes. And it's like, fuck, Ben, like, how is that internal philosophy going, mate? Like, you're doing really good with that one. Scrabbling of cats in the background. Yeah, I don't know. That's another one where, like, just seeing this dude's, like, entire internal philosophy die over the last 2 chapters is kind of brutal.
Yeah. We're getting up to the point where Natalie seems to be, like, gathering her strength over the course of this. There's this description. It was obvious she was trying to sound gentle. At the same time, she was carrying Sterling, who was, even as a wisp of a 5-year-old, 5 years old, maybe 30, 40 pounds. She is, this is what it looks like when she's putting in the effort, I think. And it is not meeting Ripley's bar.
No, and it shouldn't.
And she goes over to Ben to explain herself effectively. We have this interview. But there's this sentiment that at least, like, trying to give Ben charity. The lover through osmosis, I know it's hard, but putting it bluntly, you've been a massive bitch. Suck it the fuck up. It's harder for her.
Yeah.
Like, Ben is basically citing what, like, Ripley's friends and what Eva said, and he's found a position to plant a flag on.
Yeah, and it's a good position to have. I just wish that he would actually give some of this grace to Ripley herself, rather than giving all of the grace to Natalie. I wish he would be kinder to Ripley, which he just isn't really. He's not explicitly super cruel to Ripley, but he does what Natalie does. He thinks of her as an object more than a full human being. But
this is the thing, right? I think Ben's, what is happening with Ben here almost parallels Valentina, but brought out into, like, a final stage of life where he is dedicated to echoing the stances of others. And like after getting pushback from Devon's dad, after getting input from Eva, he's gotten enough momentum and like material and the words that other people would use to turn around and criticize Natalie. And within that framework, he's been like Nat Ali, he said belatedly, he didn't want to sound too familiar for the camera. He has been so close to Natalie's narrative for so long that in the same way that he's just now gotten enough momentum to criticize it, he otherwise doesn't when it comes, no matter where she's going with anything. It's really natural for him to just enable and yield and record what it is that Natalie has to say, which is like part of why that like in the previous years of investigation, there's been no pushback from him. Like he hasn't helped find therapy for her, for example.
Exactly.
And I think that is essentially what Ben's problem is. He is looking for the truth. He's looking for the gathering enough information that he can produce objective position for himself. So that his subjective take is subsumed by a nuanced one that has all the material. And he's otherwise low initiative. That's his only means of accomplishing that. He's looking for consensus reality, essentially. And then as he like starts to have this conflict, as he starts to have a point where there isn't consensus, his first port of call is not to say default to virtues and like go, okay, let's establish some things of stability here. Let's make sure that the kids are okay. Let's like move for comfort. Let's push some conversations off until later when we can have more time to talk about things. Instead, he goes straight to Natalie. He goes straight to the source of one consensus reality, one subjective experience that is being lifted above the others, almost to get his own position corrected. Over the course of this conversation with Natalie, there's this beat that she hits of it's toward the very end, but it's an element throughout of like, nobody believed me or backed me up during the second lowest period of my life. I deserve for it to be 15 seconds to be believed now.
That made me so mad. You don't even know. That made me so mad.
She's essentially putting forward that if enough bad stuff happens, it can be put on the scales and it can outweigh something else.
You can do whatever the fuck you want as long as people have been horrible to you. You can fuck anybody else up. As long as someone's been mean to you first, then you're perfectly validated. Not only perfectly validated, but like the world should bend to your version of what's happening because you've been fucked up. And Jesus fucking Christ, Natalie.
And I think inherently the difficulty is that is a convincing argument to Ben.
He doesn't disagree. He doesn't push back at all.
Because he's trying to find a way to make all these ideas cohabitate, like make understand why it is that Natalie is behaving the way she is, understand why it is that's important that she stop, understand how it is that she could. And the easiest thing for him to yield in terms of 5 years of research is that Natalie deserves some excuse. She deserves a lot of charity from him, and so he compromises once again, and he just puts his materials back in the box, or at least that's what I think has happened. I have more thoughts on that, but we have a lot of weeds to get into in terms of this conversation.
Yes,
so
we do.
Ultimately, this is like a really big crux point for the conversation of like giving charity to Ben and Natalie or like criticizing their behavior.
Like I do want to like call out like right at the start of the part where he's recording is, you know, when he says Nat and then she starts like, oh, I said, and then he's like, oh, Ellie, like the way that he is positioning himself as this neutral third party, just there to like investigate the truth and like shine light into the darkness. but then hiding the fact that he's got this like incredibly strong personal connection to the story and to Natalie and to Sterling, and like the fact that he's like lived in her like side room for the last couple of years, and you know, he's half parented Sterling, and she has like tried to like come on to him to date him. Like the way that all of this kind of lines up, and the fact that he basically just refuses to have that be part of the story. You know, he can't even use a shortened version of her name during the recording because that would imply that he's not a third-party uninvolved journalist, which he's not a third-party uninvolved journalist. And, you know, that's fine to not be... Like, it's an incredibly personal, like, horrible story. I don't think any journalist could do what he's been doing, go through all of that and say, I'm neutral, you know, it's fine. Like, I'm not, you know, super, like, aligned with Natalie. Like, no, of course not. Like, anyone would. But it's the fact that he's then hiding it, which, again, goes so against his personal fucking philosophy of if you just tell everybody the truth, it's going to be okay. Like, yeah, I don't know. That really bothered me because, again, it's just like so often with him, he just goes against everything he says or said earlier that he believes.
And also in his attempt to hold that superposition of turning his, like, becoming a third party uninvolved perspective while only pretending to be that and actually having a very subjective experience. His attempt to correct himself, he didn't want to sound too familiar for the camera, is like he has to speak over her. He makes it more apparent that there is this disconnect in the attempt to hide it. I do want to make it very clear that I do think that being personally involved with a case like this is only natural, and I think nobody would blame him. But I think that some obscure editing group might, you know, some obscure journalist group might be like, well, you were a little close there, you know, you weren't as like third party as a journalist technically should be. And I think he holds that standard to himself. I think he believes he should be third party and he's just not being third party. Yeah. But then, of course, we have the meat of this, which is Natalie divulging her own trauma and what had happened to her when she was growing up.
And, like, obviously it's tragic. Like, yeah. And it explains why she was the way that she was with Devon hugging Ripley. But I do think it doesn't excuse it. Like, it doesn't excuse shit.
Well, that is ultimately I that word excuse. I think for my part, the thing that Natalie is doing here is essentially appealing, like, through pathos to say that she deserves for this to be taken as an excuse for her behavior. That like this is not just an explanation, that she's not taking this from an acceptance angle of like, the reason I'm having this problem is this. The way that I'm trying to address it is this. Can you hold me accountable for that? Like, I want you to have all the information. I'm trying to work on myself. I'm trying to alter some of my instincts. This is where my instincts lie. You can help me referee these. It's not collaborative, or it's not acceptance based. It's because these things happen to me, you should excuse my behavior, because obviously this is how I've become, and that's no fault of mine. And that the fact that those things happened to me and that was no fault of mine means that my behavior is now no fault of mine. And I think that is a personal, like, I think that is a bad approach in an internal world. That is the kind of perspective that causes you to not change or grow, because you think you're living in that period of your past. There's no moving beyond it. There's no addressing it. It's just the foundation on which you as a person exist in this moment. And that's the fact that she is so raw and so like physically impacted by things that resemble this like trauma, like we use the example of Devon and Ripley being close, it shows how present these things are on her mind, even though
Yeah.
she has not divulged it to a therapist for a long time.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that's internal world, right? Like that's a matter of culpability and trying to take responsibility for your actions so that you can improve and change. The reciprocal to that is the external world, and like talking to Ben and providing this material for Ben's sake, to try and change Ben's behavior. And that's where we get this divide between explanation and excuse that I truly believe is only ever about rapport. Because like Ben could have the analytical angle of, I don't think this is a good apology for your behavior, or I don't think you're actually taking a constructive attitude toward it. He could apply that lens, but he's sooner going to apply the fact that he's known Natalie for like half a decade. He's sooner going to be affected by their rapport, the fact that Natalie is someone that he is very invested in and has a lot of time and investigative effort. And the way that she is a component in his world means that when she asks something of him, by rapport alone, that excuse becomes an explanation, and he is the one that adapts instead of her. And
I mean, he even notes like putting yourself down is not the same as putting yourself second.
Yes,
like he puts it into the camera, but then he deletes the whole conversation anyway. So yeah, and like he sees what she's doing, but he can't. At the same time, he's so like slave to her beliefs. Yeah,
that the deleting of this recording is so curious to me, because there's the world where he receives this explanation, and the reason that he rejects it, the reason he deleted it, is not because he doesn't believe it, or out of respect for Natalie, because he doesn't think that information should be out there, or even because he isn't proud of his own behavior in that scenario, where he thinks that he shouldn't have been that close, or he would have been a hypocrite for putting those things forward. There's a world where it's not any of that, and instead it's something really selfish and really horrible. Something that Eva alluded to, something that became apparent in his conversation with Eva, that it just wouldn't make money. It just wouldn't sell.
and that's a very harsh lens to look at it.
The thing is, when we first sat down with Ben, we brought up the critical lens and we really drilled into him. And giving him charity in this moment, I would say this is a really hard thing to navigate. This is a person that is struggling deeply and is putting pain back out into the world. There's no easy answer for any way forward or what to do now. And it would make sense out of respect for that person that you would just delete the recording. But the other thing is that it's the truth. Natalie is not necessarily providing a growth mindset. If we're gonna get real therapy talk about her, we can maybe criticize her for how she's holding these thoughts in her head. She's putting herself down instead of second. If we want, we can like unpack all the motivating characteristics here. But as far as Ben goes, the man says that he wants to support truth, when it seems that, at least to Eva, that he actually wants to support his own bank account. And he does that through storytelling and making a story out of reality.
And ego, I think.
And in the most critical way, if that is the crux of Ben's character, then the almost criminal deed, the thing that would put him in the same terrible category as Mia and Carson, who, again, full murderers, right? Like serial criminals. Serial criminals in our serial. Straight monsters. The thing that would make Ben evil would be that if this truth lens, this idea of being objective, this idea that the truth shall reveal, all of that's just marketing. And what he really wants is not the sob story at the center, the explanation or the excuse. He just wants something that will sell. And so his decision at the end, he weighs up all the variables. Is there a way to get a happy ending? Is there a way to hold on to our values? Is there a way to get everyone out of this alive? The one that the values that he drops and the ones that he goes forward with are the ones that are probably going to make him the most powerful documentary, the one that's going to be best edited, best filmed, and the one that's going to sell best. And if Ben is truly despicable, that is the reason why. That is the thing that goes forward with here.
And for what it's worth, I don't think that. But I could, if you're taking a very uncharitable read, I definitely see it. But for what it's worth, I don't think that it is money and ego that's making him do this. I do think it's personal, like care and affection, basically, to Natalie, and to the story. Yeah.
And poor Natalie.
Anyway, go on. Yeah, I mean, look, poor Natalie. all right, I'm gonna be a monster, and I'm gonna slightly skip around in the notes here. I'm going one note down. Talking about therapists, and she's like, at this point, it'd hurt more to dredge it all back up more than any benefit I get out of it. I've read books, sat with it on my own, and it's like, Natalie, you're an open wound of a person, and everybody can see it. People that have met you for 10 minutes can immediately see how damaged you are. Like, great that you've read books, great that you've sat with it. That's fantastic work. You need to talk to people about this. Holy shit, you need to talk to people about this. Like, holy shit, Like, she's so wounded, so obviously wounded, and it's so clear. And yet she doesn't seem to believe that she is. Like, she thinks talking about it will make it worse, when it's like, Natalie, you desperately need other perspectives on this. Like, you can't just say you've sat with it on your own and you're okay. Like, imply that you're okay. You don't even say that you're okay, but like, you imply that you're okay with how it all is, when you clearly aren't. And it just kind of hurts. And, she gives the excuse of like, it could take like a couple of years to get a therapist. So, you spend a couple of years, and what if like the gamble doesn't work out and you don't get along with them? And it's like, yeah, that'd suck, but do it. Otherwise you're just not trying at all. And if, it takes a year or 2 years to like organize like therapy. Yeah, that's too long, obviously. Like, that sucks. You go there, it doesn't work. That's fine. You don't go to that therapist. You wait another couple of years. And I get that sucks. And I get that that's rough. But Natalie, out of everyone in this story, except for now Ripley, fucking needs that shit. Like, desperately.
There's this thing over the course of this conversation. She talked about the two therapists that she's had. The one that was biased, and the one that got offended. It's like the therapist number 2 was offended. Like, I had insulted his whole profession by proxy. And I think one crucial element here is that Natalie has in the past put effort in to try and address these things. She's gone for the volunteered options. Like, at 22, she goes to a therapist. And she goes to authority figures like the parents of the people that have been bullying her when she is then spanked. And she goes to the next therapist, and it's a friend of that dad. And in that pattern, what has happened is that Natalie has just lost any faith in people, I believe. So the place that this is coming from is not, I believe, any faith that she has actually handled it. But she doesn't, like, I've read books, sat with it on my own, I think, is the emphasis here, where she does not believe that anyone is going to be able to help her without finding another reason for them to be biased or to turn around and call her manipulative. She's
Yeah.
crossed a threshold where she doesn't have faith in anyone's ability to work on her, and furthermore, like a very real possibility that it would take a real golden therapist, someone of
Mm-hmm.
incredible commitment and resources, to cross that threshold as well. So even if she did go looking, the the pain is a massive obstacle.
Yeah. Yeah, and
And
it's very understandable.
I I've been talking pretty consistently about giving Natalie charity, and this is like this is centrally a tragedy. That
Mm-hmm.
she is almost aware that she cannot help herself, or like has does in turn believe that she cannot get help. Um, and the way that that sort of engine of that Ouroboros of I must not be in pain because if I was in pain, then no one could help me, and I've tried to help myself, so I must not be in pain. Um, the within that loop, the way that Ripley fits into that narrative, you've pulled the quote, "I love her still, but I guess she let me down."
Oh, fuck me to death. Sorry, that one killed
Mm.
me. I
Within
think,
this,
yeah.
she's just fixated on her
Oh,
missing child as the solution to this Ouroboros. That
yeah.
like,
Well, I mean, she talks about it like
mm,
as like Camellia, like when she was born, was the solution as well.
mm,
And so now getting her back is the solution.
mm.
And it's like, Jesus Christ, Natalie, what's wrong with you? Well,
Well,
okay, we know
we
what's
do
wrong with
know.
her.
We
Okay,
do
that's
know.
fair. So many things. Yeah. Look, again, yeah. That was the quote that I skipped over. I love her still, but I guess she let me down. And then Ben responds, "That's not her fault." And first of all, fuck you, Natalie. And second of all, fuck you, Ben. It is not. She did not let you down. Like, she's not the perfect angel that you always imagined. She didn't grow up being abused and therefore is not super happy that you took her away from her household, which clearly is what Natalie wanted in some way, to have, Camellia be this child that was taken and abused and horribly mistreated so that she would, run back to Natalie with open arms and like be loved and be happy again. And that's just not how it's worked out. And so the reality of Ripley has come into conflict with the imagination of Camellia. And there's conflict, there's discord between them. And framing that as she let you down is like, fuck you. I don't know. Your 11-year-old child did not let you down. It that's your child. I don't know how to frame this in a better way, but like,
Mm,
fuck that entire idea so
mm,
much. Like, even saying it's not her fault still, gives credence to the idea that she did let her down. And she just didn't. Ripley has never let Natalie down. Natalie has fucked up everything with Ripley, multiple times now.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I don't know.
If I can
I really hate it.
take a moment to put all this into a fresh perspective, um, this tangled web of Natalie's pain and trauma makes an interesting contrast to Mia,
Mm-hmm.
because they are very similar in how much their central incidents have impacted the shape of their life. And in fact, it's the
Yeah.
same incident. Who has custody of Ripley?
Yeah. Yeah.
But before that time, before that, like this crucible point of the like Mia going far into a criminal lifestyle so that she can absolutely claim Ripley as her kid, and Natalie basically dropping everything, including her own health and dare I say sanity,
Mm-hmm.
to try and get Ripley back. Um, both of them have motherhood and parenting as this sort of central question in their sense of self, where Natalie's upbringing like left her deeply distrustful, and so when she was had Camellia, she really wanted to raise this child right as a sort of like forceful ending of the cycle, because if you can change it for your kid, then you must be able to change it for yourself. And Mia has a similar relationship in regards to her parenting, where we have very early on her exiting her mother's house with that sentiment of just you could have gotten to know me, like, after the injury, and you did not put in that
Yeah.
effort. So where like there is this I think it's this, that if there is a central difference, it might be between neglect and abuse, but we do not have nearly as much detail on what Mia's upbringing post injury was like, or even beforehand,
Yeah.
and how well it parallels with Natalie. But the thing that I would note is that Natalie has, over the course of this, failed in her first objective. She's trying to end the cycle of abuse, and instead, the moment that Ripley is in her care, she perpetuates it.
Yeah.
And Mia
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
is successful in her objective, apparently. It seems to be for the first 11 years that she really hit the nail on the head and raised Ripley right. But just the same, they're both being piloted by this trauma. They're both being piloted, like to a heavy degree, their lifestyle is affected by things that they cannot accept or need to prove and can't change or must live with. And so it's interesting how one is very diffuse and sort of everywhere, and the other is highly specific and didn't affect Ripley until now. I don't think it makes for an easy comparison, because Mia has so many points of apparent success in raising Ripley, and Natalie has so many points of apparent failure. And yet, on the opposite side of those high quantity scales are really significant qualities that like single moments that weigh them out, like the fact that Mia is a murderer and criminal, and that she stole Ripley, whereas Natalie,
and
for her credit, was abused and did and did in fact have Camellia stolen from her. And there's no easy comparison across these, but these characters are in conversation with each other by nature. So I struggle to make a model that can accommodate both of them, but I'm really chewing on it. I'm really trying to see how they line up. I certainly want to see more from Mia now, to have more of her history and perspective, because locking in the comparison at this point, there's a lot of moving parts still of things we don't know.
Yeah, and actually, I've just like connected this back to like, this is a relatively, I don't know, not super common thing that happens in Wild Boar stories, but relatively common in that you'll get like an interlude perspective from a character relatively early in the story, and you'll be like, damn, that was really good. Like, it really clarified how they feel. And then like 5 or 6 arcs will pass, and like the character will be very different now. And you'll be like, I really want to know like what's happening in their head. Like, this is like, I'm desperate to get like a look at in their character, like in their head now. I want to know more. Like, so much of the early stuff was like setting up all of this thing. I just need to know more. Give me more. That's definitely how I feel with Mia. Like, so much of Mia was like building context about the world, building context about her, like her and her family, and like how they deal with things. And so at this point now, I'm like, I really want to get back into Mia's head. Like, I really want to see how she's dealing with everything that's happened here. And I want to see more of her backstory and what growing up for her was like. Because obviously we got that snapshot right at the end. And I mean, you can extrapolate out from the snapshot. But yeah, I'd be definitely interested in learning more. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Next notes. So there's this moment where Natalie says, I don't have much money. You've made it clear you're not into me or you're not into women. And I do want to say I really like this moment because it does clarify her finances, which I took a very uncharitable reading on. I'm willing to accept that I was wrong and very uncharitable. It does seem like Ben was correct. Like, she didn't embezzle money from that company. She was just taking the same salary, the same full-time salary for full-time work, even though the donations had like trickled down. Yeah. So that's, I copped to that. I was wrong. Yeah. And I also really like her and like the way that Ben says, like, I'm not into exploitation. I really like that. Yeah, because
hey, he's got some integrity, or at least he's there's a degree to which
like
he's
he
trying
does.
to.
Yeah, like I mean, like straight up, he does have like a moral compass. He has broken like his personal belief of like the underlying core of that a bunch in these couple of chapters about his about the truth. But like he has morals, and it like that's a good thing. A, to have morals, and B, like the specifics of this one of like sleeping with someone that you're doing a documentary about is like super sketchy. It's really, really sketchy. So I was very glad to see like that called out by him. Because it gives us more of an idea of like his own personal moral compass. And it's like, he's got a decent moral compass. He's like a decent enough dude.
Whether he always follows that moral compass's direction is in question.
Yeah.
And there's certainly times in this narrative where the magnetic spins in the compass, he doesn't know which way is north.
Yes.
Which we get a lot of at the very end.
We do. Sorry, go on.
But before we get on to the conversation between Ben and Ryder, who I believe, if I'm looking at the notes right, I think he accidentally calls Roderick again, but or at least in his internal monologue. But I think, we discussed a lot of Natalie, we discussed a lot of Ben, and we've even touched on Mia, and there's this plain element of just, like, even by the moral compass, there is a blind spot here, which we've, of just Ripley and Sterling, and what's right for them, because it's none of this.
Yeah.
It's none of the within the equation, like the simple answer of Ripley belongs with her biological mother and should go to Natalie. Ripley does not want that, plain faced. Ripley going back to the woman that stole her. Ripley may want that, but it's a bad answer because she's a criminal.
It is. For a lot of reasons, it's a bad answer. But because she's a very violent criminal.
So as he is navigating by this moral compass, there are blind spots here. He doesn't put any thought onto what is the best solution because he's already picked his destination. He simply thinks that there's an objective answer of Ripley should go with Natalie.
Ripley goes with Natalie. Yeah,
and furthermore, he resolves that Mia Hurst needs to die to make that answer, to lock in that answer. And there's just very little presence of like we've noted already that I guess one day Ripley and Sterling will see it. She said softly, "Even if I don't have to buy your help, I've shared it. Isn't that showing I can put myself second?" Which is still putting herself first. She's trying to show that she can put herself second, which is kind of a weird mix of priority. Kind of like saying that you're being humble.
Exactly.
And
but like,
she's putting herself semi first, or at least trying to put the idea of her coming second first, and then putting herself down isn't the same as putting herself second. But how will this affect my children's relationship with me? And like all of Ripley and Sterling's friends will watch it, the parents of those friends. The Ripley and Sterling will have to live with Ben's work And that
Yeah,
is
they will
going to
have to.
make
They are
all
living
of
a
this
public life.
worse.
Yeah,
It's going to make all of this
exactly.
incredibly worse. So the Ben fixating on getting Ripley to Natalie is as much Ben fixating on releasing this documentary in a way that makes Ripley and Sterling public figures.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this is where we get back into my very low charity read of Ben, where he is only in it for the money or the product, because there's very little presence of considering what it is that those two need. Just a focus on how Natalie relates to that for the narrative.
Yeah. And look, I mean, like with this, when she's like, she says she's putting herself second, but like when she thinks about it, she's thinking, how is it like Ripley and Sterling are going to see this, and how does that affect me? Like, how does that affect not my relationship with my children, but my children's relationship with me? And like, that's not the framing, like it's. Yeah, like it is Ripley and Natalie. Oh, sorry, fucking Christ. Ripley and Sterling as forever public figures. Like they cannot escape this. Everybody that they meet for the rest of their life, assuming that this documentary does well, which Ben seems to think it will do really well. Everyone they meet for the rest of their life will watch this documentary, because who wouldn't? Like you meet someone and you hear that that they were like part of a documentary about being kidnapped, and you're like, that sounds fascinating. Like, I have to watch this. Like, yeah, everybody's going to watch it. There's no people that they meet that are going to see that and not think, holy fuck, I should go watch this documentary. And that fucks up all of their relationships for the rest of their lives. And that's fucked. Like, that's...
But he's got to get the documentary out.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a journalist. He's got to put it out there.
Yeah, he's got to get that truth out there.
And
it doesn't cross his mind, and I hate it. I hate it.
And that's part of why I think he deletes it. But we've gotten into that already.
Yeah.
If we're about ready, we can move on to the conversation between him and Ryder.
Yeah. So yeah, there's this moment where he talks about the kind of things that Mia is the kind of threads Mia is pulling on. And he says like, oh, if Roderick hadn't interrupted me, I'm sure there would have been a bunch more stuff I could find. And then the next paragraph straight away is the abductor showing herself to be more of a monster in terms of how powerful she was, how far her reach might go. It's like, that's so fucked. He's just straight up rationalizing it. Like, he knows that the Cavalcantis are working with the government. Like, they are destroying the foundations of like governed life in this area. They are like deputizing their entire gang to work for the like very right-wing areas of the government. And then he thinks, oh yeah, but this one person with like who has a bunch of connections to other smaller gangs and is trying to fight this, she's way more evil, dude. Like, she's way worse. And it's like, fucking Christ, like this is such a huge structural problem happening right now, where the government is literally being eroded to nothing, in the fact that they're going to they're replacing the military arm of the local government with straight up a gang. That is very explicitly a gang that is like buying stolen hardware from the military and shit. And it's like, he doesn't stop and say, you know what, actually, that's probably worse than this one person who is like doing some fucked up shit. Yes, but like doing fucked up shit to try and stop this gang.
He, instead of putting Mia across from the Cavalcantis and letting the Cavalcantis outweigh her, he has to build her up in his own mind. He creates the monster of Mia that is far, far more terrifying than Mia actually is. And lessens the effect of the Cavalcantis so that they can be on the same, so they can balance each other out. And then he can say, oh, actually, I guess in this case, we should go with the establishment.
Yeah.
And
Fuck, man.
this is the thing, because the way that he accomplishes that is through this sort of narrativization. He's looking at Valentina's data set, and he's looking at Mia's data set, and he's thinking about what story is being told by them. He's looking for the blind spots. He sees Mia's perspective on the world and notices that he's not in the picture. He sees Valentina's perspective and essentially sees noise, like just so much data, an overwhelming thing.
Yeah.
And in synthesizing them together, he reproduces his feeling, the thing that he wants. And this is a very conspiracy theory mindset of trying to of having a lot of evidence in front of you, and essentially needing to compose a story beyond that evidence so that you can then hold the values you already have. So like, and it kind of reminds me of like a lot of the coal is coming from inside the house politics of like, I mean, I'll use a piece of something that's in the news relatively frequently lately, which is like accusations of drag queens targeting children. Where a lot of that criticism comes from people that are somehow involved in the Catholic Church. And the call is coming from inside the house as far as that kind of thing goes. So comparing that to Ben, he's looking at this situation where he has a lot of evidence on the Cavalcantis being a structural problem. He's got a lot of evidence that Mia has composed that puts her in a pretty good light, relatively, where she is identifying the threats that are being posed to Ben and to his little company, and in the noise between that and the things that Mia doesn't volunteer, and the the sheer emphasis, the quantity of information available for Cavalcantes, he resolves that Mia must be incredibly capable, that she must have a bigger, that she must be the equal of this operation. And then there's this really telling moment. We talked previously about Carlos, who, when Valentina was being confronted with, like she was maybe going to be abducted and taken back to Davy, she warded Carlos off by saying, "I'm going to show you the photos," and because Carlos knew that if those things did exist, it would undermine so much of his values. He refused to see them, and eventually that was what scared him off. The idea of there being something that would throw him off entirely. Ben is effectively psychs himself out about Mia. He puts all of this information together, and he resolves that this is a woman that's very dangerous, that has it out for them, is going to catch them. All of which is based in truth, but there's a lot of hyperbole going on. Like he's bringing her up to the level of the Cavalcantes.
Yeah, while knowing that the Cavalcantes have access to spy satellites. Jesus Christ.
And then he has this thing. You're not working directly with Davy Cavalcanti, but you're working with the judge, who almost certainly is, Ben said. He didn't look at Ryder as he made the accusation. You don't know what you're talking about, Ben. You don't... do you owe the judge favors? Is that it? Did he get you off the hook? No. Ben waited, letting the silence hang. You sound pretty certain of this bullshit. They got you good, huh? Call your judge. If he's the go-between or anything like that, use him to get in touch with Davy Cavalcanti. So Ben doesn't look at Ryder as this accusation is made. And partially, I would imagine, that's because Ryder has taken a shit.
Mid shit,
But then he does look... So it apparently isn't too much of a problem, or at least not one that he's willing to stand by. And Ryder has resolved his expression into an expression hard to read but concerned. And at no point does Ryder say, "You're completely wrong. You don't know what you're talking about," or "They got you pretty good." And then he hits with the resolution of, we can save Ripley
We'll
and have a
work with-
documentary, but we
yeah.
can't do it and remain good. We'll work with the Cavalcantis to get rid of Mia. He refuses to look at the person that could undo this perspective, because if Ryder is definitely, certainly working with Cavalcantis, or worse, does not want to, because he knows how bad they are, and he's the kind of person that would call himself Ryder because he wants to be a sheriff that works outside of the institution, is going to dole out real justice. He cannot have any sort of reality besides the one he's resolved, which is that it is perfectly reasonable to work with the Cavalcantis against Mia.
And
they got him good. he's really freaked out. And he does not know what he's talking about. But it doesn't not matter yet where Ryder stands. It does not matter where Mia stands. What matters is that Ben has taken all the information available, cast his blind spots where he needs them, so that he can set off in the direction that gets him the things that he wants, which is saving Ripley, yes, and having a documentary. And that is more important to him than remaining good.
Yeah. And it's rough. And look, I don't know obviously we haven't read the next chapter.
Oh golly, but I'm excited.
Yeah.
That's gonna be fun.
I'm so curious about like what Roderick is thinking here. Like, we know he finds the idea of like Davy distasteful from like right at the start of the chapter. Like, and we know his general areas of expertise like kind of match with Mia's, where he focuses on like women and children and like getting them to safety, and Mia's is like primarily children. So like, what was this angel circle job? Okay, like, is there that lineup with Roderick and Mia and where their priorities lie, or is Roderick going to pick, the person who, quite frankly, has done a lot worse than Mia over Mia? But I guess does he know exactly how fucked up Davy is? Like, yeah, where is the line going to be drawn? I am so curious, because obviously, like, yeah, we've seen a lot with Ben, how he is very happy to
it's
meld
so fun.
The lines, and yeah,
it's so fun that they're having a conversation where Ryder legitimately says that's bullshit, and while he's taking a shit, and the rapport between these two is so strange, because
it's so weird.
Ryder cracks this joke about how he wanted to like get some ammunition before he flushed Ben's head, and Ben kind of like laughs a little at that, like finds himself smiling despite himself.
It's so weird.
There is some boys' locker room rapport here, and it's so odd. And at the same time, I think the purpose of it is telling us that Ryder is relatively speaking a simple guy. Like, he is like, why is he here? Because he thinks that he's doing something that like a schoolyard kid would want to do. Someone when he was young told him that he could be a superhero or a police officer or a fireman, and then they introduced Parapolice, and he grew up watching the Ward's TV show, and he was like, finally, I can be Aegis. Oh, I can be Galen. It's gonna be great. I even have a cape name ready, and the fact that Ryder is not volunteering what he knows, and is staying in this sort of comfort space of cracking jokes and not committing to an answer. He's
so
just trying to
curious.
hold on to his friendship to Ben. He's trying to exist in the world where he's just a guy playing a game. And that is about to fall apart.
Big time.
But if we'd like to get into bold and specific predictions about where that might go next.
Yes. I do just want to quickly say, and I didn't write this down in a note, but there is a moment like right near the end there where Ben is like kind of deciding to call, like, that he wants to call Davy, and he wants to like betray Mia to Davy, and then he immediately is like, oh, that stinks, like, to Ryder fuck to Roderick. I liked that. It was a good moment of him like internalizing he's going to do something that really sucks and then being like, oh, that stinks. Yeah, I don't know. Fun literary moment. BS predictions. So my BS prediction is Ryder is going to get his phone and he's going to instantly call Mia and tell her their exact location and that Ben is trying to sell her out to Davy. He wants nothing to do with Davy, who is a fucking monster. That's my BS prediction.
I'm going to double down on what I made earlier, which is that Ryder is going to use this whole fiasco as an opportunity to distinguish himself as a real proper hero, and he's going to get shot and he's going to die.
Nice. Good either way, honestly. Yeah, okay. So, discussion question. So, last week we asked,
what is a petty way that you would get back at an annoying journalist?
And honestly, like, you guys answered really well. Because
yes.
like I didn't have a good answer for this.
This was
a hard question. I'm sorry, but yeah.
I think it is. Like previously in other books, there's been a lot of world building questions of like, where would you fit yourself in the magic system or the power system? And I think I've started to find a formula for drawing discussion questions from chapters of what would you do in this character's position. So I'm glad that it's getting a response because otherwise I might have to start asking more non sequiturs.
Yes.
But Megafire7 said that I think it would be I would stealthily use a laser pointer to fuck up their footage of me or angle a mirrored surface so there's always annoying light shining into their lens.
That's a good one. 40i2 did say that they were really not sure about how, like, what they would do, but then they gave a perfect answer. So they said there's not much room for a petty revenge that would not be illegal, childish, or unacceptable, but still feel somewhat satisfying and not like a waste of time. Maybe make a podcast to rant about him. And that is so valid. I can't even, like, that's
good
the perfect
news.
Answer.
It exists.
Good news. Yay.
Sweet Manzana said, I would mess with somebody recording footage for a documentary by playing copyrighted music on the background whenever I can. See if I can make some of the footage or audio unusable.
That's very good. That's very petty. Bellic Tal says that this would only work in very specific circumstances, but they'd watch until the person did a bad parking job and then call the bylaw so that they'd get a parking ticket. Mwahaha.
The mwahaha was very important there.
Yes, that was included in the comment.
From the Discord forum, I'm going to try and pronounce this, Zithizes. I would take the largest mirror I could conceivably carry, point it at them, and repeat every question to them again. Oh, you're interviewing me? Well, now you're interviewing yourself. How does that feel, Dinkus? How does that feel, Dinkus was my own editorializing.
So then for our own answers, I would probably make like a loudish... I was thinking like, what's the most annoying thing to deal with when you're editing sound? So I was thinking I would make a loudish background sound in the middle of speaking so that editing my voice becomes a nightmare. Yeah.
And I would put a cat in the editing room. And every time he tried to remove it, I would introduce another cat.
Very good answer. Yeah. So this week's discussion question is...
What should you lie to children about? So
tricky question.
I mean, we have this very contentious example of choosing, I would say, the status quo or peaceful solution of lying to Ripley about what Natalie is saying as to make that the truth, to draw her away from her criminal mother. That's really difficult to evaluate.
Super difficult.
While it's a very specific example, I do generally concur that there are times when a child does not need to know something in full, and whether that means that you should lie to them about it to later reveal the truth or hide it to them outright or just try and change the subject. I'm very interested to hear where people's perspectives land on that. And particularly if you'd like to volunteer examples of when you have had to lie to a child, I think that would be a great time.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. Okay, so I guess we're all done. Thank you for listening. make sure to check out Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow. This is his high-speed chase. We're just vomiting up our plain sandwiches.
Please give us a rating and a review on the podcatcher of your choice.
And if you want to chat to us about the show or follow along with some live reads, check out our channel on the Doof Media Discord. Find the invite link at doofmedia.com/discord.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.